Anna and myself were talking earlier on about, Anna asked me about velocipede wheels, and she was interested in how we went from a wheel size that got bigger and to a sort of a slightly bigger wire wheel and to a pennyfarthing wheel, and then finished up on a bicycle that looked much more like today's bicycle, like a safety bicycle. And so the wheels on a bicycle, it's one of those sorts of things that we don't think about it, but because we're so used to gearing on a modern bike, in effect the wheel size gave you the gearing on a front wheel drive bicycle. So the bigger the wheel, the bigger the gear. So whilst it looks more similar to a modern bike, the reality is on a small wheel you're pedaling very, very quickly, like a child on a sort of tricycle. But to increase the wheel, you obviously, for each revolution, you move further per wheel. So it was logical that you just make bigger and bigger wheels. There were two elements really that we don't tend to think about. Is the wheels relate to the size of the rider, and getting particularly big with a wooden wheel is quite challenging. So if you
Why is that? Why is it challenging?
Well, let's do the riders first.
Okay.
Because the riders, I think that's one of the things that people tend to completely overlook. You were saying earlier on, because you'd Googled it and you'd looked how much difference there was in height during the mid-19th century between a working
class youth and a wealthy student.
And you 22 centimetres,
yeah.
8.5 inches difference on average.
On average.
And in inner city areas,
even more
even
pronounced.
More so.
Yeah.
So of course at this point, the controlling and the overriding factor that sort of controlled the size of the wheel in many cases was your class. So somebody my height at 6'3" could ride a much bigger wheel than somebody at 5'3". Now I don't have to be any stronger as a cyclist, but because I'm on this stonking great big wheel and I'm going around a flat track
on one of these,
on one of those, by definition I will be quicker because I've just got such a big gear to pull.
Yeah, you just got one revolution.
And you know, you forget about a lot of the time back then, there was an awful lot of this riding going around velodromes. So the size of the wheel was very much related to the class. Equally, there was quite a cost to buying a machine in the first place. But as the safety bicycle came in, and we were then driving the rear wheel with a chain at the front and a sprocket, we could equalise the 54 or 56 inch wheel of a pennyfarthing through gearing rather than a direct drive. And at that point, all of a sudden, the class sort of dominance of the upper class suddenly came back into reach of the working man.
And so we need to spell out really that the wealthier people had greater access to protein, which enabled them to grow.
Absolutely.
And they had less stressful environments growing up, generally in terms of overcrowding, likelihood to get a disease. And on a cellular level, your body will prioritise survival over growth.
Precisely.
So wealthier human beings were taller.
Yeah. So you've got these very strong working class lads, but they could never compete
because their legs were simply not as big to make that.
Wheel. So that was, you know, the sort of the development,
the social history of cycling.
Yeah, but then the wheel itself, which is an interesting thing, because the wooden-based wheel here. So here we have called a compression-based wheel. So all of the weight of the bicycle and the rider is bearing down on the lower spokes. Entirely, the weight's completely being pushed onto the lower spokes. And then you may have heard of people talking about a tension wire wheel. Well, a tension wire wheel, in effect, reverses that. It's a wire wheel, by definition, it's a different thing. But it's rather like this. This is probably one of the earliest examples you will see of a tensioned wire wheel. This is made by Reynolds and May. This was patented very early, so like April 1869. So this was patented before Eugene Mayer patented that design of wheel back there. But in effect, what we're doing here is the weight of the bicycle is borne by the top spokes being pulled. So they're all being pulled in, so they are now in tension rather than compression. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it just completely reverses it.
So it totally reverses it. So what you've got here is you've got, if you think back to your sort of school days of the Industrial Revolution, you had this guy, 1856, Henry Bessemer created his blast furnace, and the new furnace converter that he'd worked out, which one of the problems with steel production was carbon, and we used to, you've heard of people talking about pig iron and cast iron. It's like steel, but it's got too much carbon in. It's the same principle, but they couldn't get the carbon out of the steel. Well, Bessemer came up with this idea of blowing air through the molten iron, which created an oxide for the carbon elements that were attracted to the oxygen, if I get this right, and removed the carbon completely from the steel or the iron and created steel, and then very tiny bits of carbon were put back into it. So when people talk about a carbon, so like that's got a higher carbon content because it's a spring.
Right.
But it's only about 1% of the material.
So it's very controlled.
Terribly, and it's controlled. But it enables the wheel maker to start using thinner materials, which was starting to use steel.
So that's steel on that bike?
That will be steel there, that will be steel. So if you look at this, this is iron, there's no question, that's iron.
Which makes it a very heavy machine.
That's forged with a hammer. It's a very hefty production. Now that could have been made, this is 1869, but it could have been made 1769 or 1660.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing
the
in
technology
the technology,
didn't change.
nothing at all. They could have made this. They haven't invented that, but they could have made that.
Yeah.
Now this bike here is a Humber, it's about 1883, I think, 82, 83. These are hollow tubes. You know, this is a drawn hollow backbone.
So this is so much lighter.
So it's hollow, it's light, it's made of steel. The spokes are tiny little high carbon steel, and you suddenly created this entirely different sort of wheel. In effect, is what we're talking about. So the two things, you know, when you look at wheel size, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, so that you can
go faster.
Go faster.
Yeah.
This was really the sort of the green light to turn this and make this thing move forward as any great numbers was Bessemer and his converter. That wasn't designed for bicycles, it was designed for armament and industry and stuff, but one of the knockoffs was it helped bicycles develop. And when you look at any product really made in around about 1880s, 1890s, they are entirely different in their construction to something made in the 1860s.
Just so much finer.
They've moved from iron to steel.
Yeah,
and being steel, that was it. So the wheels got bigger. Starley made this tension spoke wheel that, I don't know, it was about 72 inches or something.
It'd be pretty tall to ride that.
You had a step up the backbone to get onto it.
So that is not even a big penny, that one?
That would be too small for me to ride.
Oh.
But then there wouldn't be many people at my height.
Yeah, in 1869.
In that sort of, so that's a relatively small bike. It's, I think, a 50-inch or 52-inch that bike. So that was the progression. And as I said, the big change was when we started to adopt what we call a safety bicycle, which is a chain-driven rear wheel and a gearing option. And the ultimate change in it was when we had the pneumatic tyre developed by Dunlop. And that then made a safety bicycle a very rideable machine.
Yeah, so much more comfortable. So I was just really interested in how it went from the velocipede to this. Is this the Michaud in front of me?
That's a Michaud there, yeah.
Yeah, and then that was pedal driven, whereas the early velocipedes, like Draisiens, is that what they were called?
That's right,
that you just used your feet and no pedals. And then pedals came on, and then the pedals the pedals obviously turned the wheel around, which gave you your speed, and then it was worked out that the larger the wheel, the faster you would go, and so you had to be tall in order to go fast. And then when chains and gearings and hubs came in, it went back to looking more like the Michaud. So it's just quite an interesting evolution from that kind of almost ordinary looking bicycle to that kind of extraordinary. I shouldn't use the word ordinary because that gets really confusing in bike world, doesn't it?
Well, we call that an ordinary.
Yeah.
We call it a safety bicycle.
Yeah.
A rear drive.
I
tend
know.
to call them front drivers, but you know.
Well, kind of like if child's drawing of a bicycle now doesn't look too dissimilar to that, it wouldn't look like that.
No.
But then it went back, it went back
But
to
again, a lot of people see a pennyfarthing as probably the better known, or in America known as high wheel. They think that was the beginning of the bicycle. It wasn't. It actually started.
Yeah, it was that.
Really
it was just an evolution. It's halfway
the
through,
whole
isn't
thing
it?
was an evolution. But what I find really quite interesting is how quickly it changed.
Yeah.
So quickly.
Yeah.
The speed of change back then was quite enormous.
Phenomenal.
I mean, I was talking about this wheel here. Well, Reynolds and May are a company that is not recognised much in this country, and little is spoken about it. But this wheel is so significant in the development of wheels because it was, as far as I can see, it was the first tension spoked wheel that was patented for a bicycle.
You've read it as well, haven't you?
I've read their patent. We downloaded their patent, and throughout all of the references to the wheel, they are talking about the wheel being a tension rather than a compression spoke, i.e. it hangs off the top here. Now, clearly, when you look at it, it's flawed, and there's an awful lot of things that you could do to improve it.
Yeah, it looks a bit gappy, doesn't it?
But once you've got your head around what you're doing, it's not a great leap to go from this to that, which was Eugene Mayer. And I think, I can't say, but I suspect once Mayer had seen this, it was obvious you're going to go to that. But it is a big leap to go from this to this, because until this point, every wheel that was used in vehicles, whether cars, whatever, was all a wooden-based wheel or an iron-based wheel in compression. So to take the...
You're flipping it completely, aren't you? Yeah.
So actually this Reynolds and May's development of the wheel and their early patent is massively significant and barely spoken about in the cycling world. Yeah. Everybody, if you talk about the tension spoke, everybody would naturally go to Eugene Mayer as the sort of father of the tension spoke wheel. And I don't think that's really the case. I think
shining the light on the new old guys.
Well, there was a strong agenda to make it a French design, I believe, and I don't think it was. I know if you just look at the dates, that was something like October or November '69. Yeah. And Reynolds and May was April '69. So without question, it predated it. Yeah. And they were very specific on their patent as to how they described it. Right. So there was an awful lot of...
I think there's a bit of overlapping going on.
There's, like everything, a bit like we were talking last time about the development of who was the person who really invented the velocipede, or a driven front, and I don't think the answer will ever really find the answer. There's a strong belief that it was Michaud. But equally, there was a French chap who moved out to America and called Lallement, and Pierre Lallement patented it. And the first patent for a velocipede was lodged in America by this French guy called Pierre Lallement. And ironically, visually it looked just the same as a Michaud.
But he wasn't known for it.
Sort of history pretty much wrote him out.
Do you know what I'm going to say, Jules? It was lamentable.
Yeah, well done. So yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot. There's one or two American historians who are really pushing for Lallement to be recognised for
Sort
it.
of resurrected as the father of
I
the.
don't know, but I mean, it's a bit like the sort of early flight, isn't it? Everyone says the first people to fly were the Wright brothers. But there's definitions of flight, and if you were from France, you would say it was Henri Farman in a flight.
Okay.
So you know, I'm not sure.
Interpretation.
But
it's the lens you choose to look through.
It is indeed, and I hope it would want. No, I suspect it'll never ever be.
Yeah.
Resolved.
Well, I think that's really fascinating. The sort of combination of the technology with the move to steel, from wood to iron to steel, and then also the social aspect as well, being factored in, the fact that people of differing heights were needing different solutions.
Yeah, and it's sort of the interesting thing to sort of finish it, when we went back to the safety bicycle, and there was a lot of professional cycling at that stage, so there was a lot of money being made through betting on it. It was pretty much dominated by the working man. Pretty much that was
stronger.
And it actually found a real strong leaning towards like the socialist sort of views. And cycling was always very leftward leaning.
Yeah.
It really had been.
Because then I suppose with the geared safety bike, there comes a point where a smaller, lighter person
and as strong as somebody, you know, if you've worked all day in the fields, or you know, farmer's boy, or worked in industry, you were a strong lad, really tough, and they could make money, and they became little superstars, and they were extraordinary. But the dynamics changed, and equally the wealthy generation of young cyclists tended to migrate across to motor cars.
Right, okay.
So a lot of them
left the scene.
It was just when motor cars came out, so people like SF Edge and stuff like that. They all moved across to an internal combustion engine.
Yeah, gosh. And then World War One came.
Oh, that was a long way.
We were even
pre-War War at this time.
I know, but with the motor car becoming like an item that young wealthy guys would have, the First World War wasn't that long after that.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, I've dropped my phone, sorry. Poor filming. Anyway, that was really fascinating. No. Right, thank you, Jules. More on that. Wheels and growth and nutrition and smelting, it's all going on.
Yeah, covering it all here today. Okay, guys, thanks very much.